startup drafts. And today, in this edition, we're going to talk about how to draft your Dynasty Owner Championship team. We're not going to go into who to draft. We're going to talk about some things this week that can maybe help you get a little bit of an advantage over other folks when you are doing your 2021 Dynasty Owners startup draft. So things we're going to talk about is there a certain type of league that you should be in? There's 3 different types that new players can join. There's for the love of the game leagues, which are free but have a $29 fee. You've got your $50 cash leagues where each team puts in $50 and the winner takes part of most of the pot. And you've got $100 buy-in leagues. So we've got those types. So do folks do better in the one type of league in terms of getting into the chase for the ring versus another type of league? We'll look into that. Then we're going to look in when should you draft your Dynasty Owner team. For example, is it better to go early, like right after the NFL draft, or is there some advantage to going later once training camp's been held, rosters have been finalized? And finally, we're going to look at draft position and sort of, the drafts are supposed to be equal. So all draft positions have the same chance, have the same opportunity, but maybe some spots are better or worse when you're a dynasty owner. And so we want to look at that and see if there's anything in the data that supports maybe having a certain draft slot. So first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to see what type of league had the best owners. And as a dynasty owner, I think that we're the best owners. The beta users are the best owners because we played in 2019. I'm sure if you polled the beta users, almost all of them would say that. But, let's check out the data, see if that's true, see if there were more beta used owners in the top 25 versus non-beta owners. And maybe there's a certain type of league that had more owners in the top 25. So we're going to look at some data to see if that's borne out. And here it is. So as you can see right here, we've got the $50 cash games. And those were about 1/4 of the leagues, 27%. But they had 11 out of the top 25 played in $50 cash leagues. So maybe those are the best owners there. On the other side of the coin, you can think about being competitive and being the most competitive. Those would have fewer folks in the top 25 because the ownership is better, for lack of a better word. And so if you talk about that, then the $100 cash leagues, those were 19%, or about 1 out of every 5 leagues was a $100 cash league, but only 2 out of the top 25 were in the top. 2 out of the top 25 were played in $100 cash leagues. Now, my beta owners, sorry, we were about average in 2020. There's about 9% of the leagues are beta leagues, some of the original leagues, plus other ones that played last year, and some special leagues. And only 2 out of the beta owners finished in the top 25 with their teams playing against other beta owners. So clearly we were about average. But so, what that means is if you're picking your 2020 startup league and you want a chance to maybe make it into the top 25, win the ring, a $50 league sounds a little bit better, at least based on 2020 data. Whereas if you want the most competition you can possibly get and you have the money, the $100 cash league is probably for you. All right, so we're going to go back. Now we're going to talk about the next thing is, okay, so now that we know what type of league you should join, then the question becomes, when should you draft your dynasty owner team? Is there an advantage to drafting early or maybe drafting later? And I didn't think about this question until I was emailing Victor, our Chase for the Ring winner. And he mentioned to me that, what he said was he waited until basically the last possible day to draft in order to have the most information about the NFL, what NFL teams would look like. And I thought that was really interesting because I drafted very early in my beta league. We were the first draft. We were in mid-June when we first started to do drafts. And I felt like I know as much as everybody else in the league at that point. And when you draft at the end, you know as much as everybody else in the league. But the question is it better to sort of go early and make predictions and figure out things that maybe other owners aren't figuring out, or take some chances and do things that you anticipate are going to happen during the course of the season? Or is it better to wait till the end and sort of just go with what happens and, go with what happens? You'll know things like Leonard Fournette got cut. You'll know other things that, people who drafted early didn't know. So when we look at those, when we look at those, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at based on roster day. So the roster day last year was September 5th, and it was the day where the 53-man roster had to be set for all the teams. So we want to see if you drafted before that day or after that day, if there was more, you were more likely to make it into the top 25 of the chase. And what we've got here, what the data is going to show is that actually what it shows is, while 78% of the leagues were drafted before roster cut day, 84% of the top 25, or 21 out of the 25 top 25, were in leagues that drafted before roster cut day. So that's interesting. So it means there's kind of a little bit of an advantage if you want to make it into the chase to going early. But then what happens? Well, what about, maybe not so late that everybody has the same information about the rosters, but what happens if maybe you start like with training camp or anything like that? And so we look at the training camp data and we'll see that, oh my gosh, if you drafted pre-camp, training camp, we're counting training camp day as being July 28th. That's when most of the camps open for most of the players. Some rookies and veterans and quarterbacks reported early, but the 28th was about the day for everybody. So that's the day we picked. And we find that while 44% of Dynasty Owner leagues drafted before camps opened, 60% of the top 25, or 15 out of the top 25 in the chase for the ring, drafted before camps. So then the question becomes, well, how early is too early? Do you really want to draft right after the rookie draft, the NFL rookie draft, or do you want to kind of wait a little bit? And that data, interestingly enough, shows that folks who drafted in June, even though it's pretty even, about a quarter of the leagues drafted in each month, June, July, August, and September. If you drafted early, 9 out of the top 25 drafted in June. Which is interesting because not all the beta users, or most of them drafted in June, but we did find that they weren't more likely to be in the top 25. So it seems like some of those folks who maybe joined Dynasty Owner early last year kind of delved into the format, maybe did some mock drafts, practiced, looked around at salaries and stuff, and then drafted in the early part. Those were the folks who were more likely to finish in the top 25. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, talking, in emailing Victor, he basically won the ring by drafting his team. He drafted his team late. So, that's one way. But, the other way to look at it, maybe it's not necessarily the type of league that you join, or maybe it's not when you draft your Dynasty Owner team, but maybe it's the draft position you get. Is draft position change? Does draft position change your chances of being a Dynasty Owner champion? So we're going to take a look at that now, sort of say which draft position is the best. And by the best, we're talking about how many people won in Dynasty Owner from that draft position. And we will see. We will look at that, and we will see that. In a second, we'll see which draft position was the best. But if in normal snake draft, because of the snake draft, there's 12 draft positions in Dynasty Owner drafts, and there should be about 8% or so winning from each draft position. So let's check it out and see what draft position was the best, and we'll see that not too much difference, but it was a little bit of an advantage to be drafting here in the 6th position or the 8th position, and followed by the 11th and the 1st position. So those are where more Dynasty Owners drafted, more league winners drafted from than any other draft position. And then if you look at the other side, if you look at the other side and what was sort of the worst position, you see that the number 12 spot was the worst. Only 3% of Dynasty Owner league winners drafted from there, followed by the 7th spot and then the 2 spot. So that's interesting. Of course, it does. It's one of those things where everybody's different. Victor, he was on the 10 slot, so he drafted from the 10 spot, which was around average and everything like that. So the question becomes, was one spot more likely to be in the top 25 than overall? And by looking at the data again, we will see that there were folks in every draft position who did well, but the number 3 position seems to be the best. We had 5 out of the 25 in the top 25 in the chase for the ring drafted from the number 3 position. 4 people drafted from the number 4 position. 3 drafted from the 6, 3 drafted from the 8, and 3 drafted from the 9 spot. And interestingly, there were 2 spots where nobody who finished in the top 25 in the chase for the ring drafted from, and that was the number 5 spot and the number 7 spot. And both of those had slightly lower than average drafts where the winner finished in the top 20, finished as the league winner. So I think that's a little bit interesting. So, I mean, it doesn't show there's a great spot for everybody to kind of really want to be drafting from, but there are places that sometimes might be a little bit better than others. But in the end, I think what's more important probably than what position you draft in is who you draft. And that's something we're going to get into in the next video. But, you know, so those things are some things we found out on how to draft a Dynasty Owner Championship team based on the 2020 data. But, you know, don't worry. You know, you don't have to follow all those things. I mean, Victor, who won the chase to the ring, he waited to draft till late. He was in a $50 league, and he had the number 10 slot. But in contrast, the number 2 team in the chase to the ring, which was Quarantine for Greatness, he drafted his team in June, at the end of June, about a month before training camps open. He had the 6th draft slot, and he was in a For the Love of the Game league. So, you know, and those 2 teams were the top 2 teams last year, number 1 and number 2 for the regular season, and both of them won their championships, so they finished 1 and 2 in the chase to the ring at the end. So it just shows that there's different ways to go about drafting your Dynasty Owner team, and different ways to do that. And there's not one size fits all for everybody. So we're going to continue on this series. I've got a lot more data to break down. That's just this week's article and this week's video. We'll take a look at some other burning questions. But do you have a question? If you have a question, drop it in the chat here on YouTube. Send me a tweet. Tweet me at SteveVT33. Let me know what your question is. Maybe you have a great question that I haven't thought of yet about how to draft your team, how to construct your roster. You know, are there ideas on do you draft more running backs, less running backs, anything, whatever you think you can come up with. If I can analyze it with the data, I'll try to do that and answer your question in a future article. Thanks for watching. Thanks for reading the article. Don't forget to follow the rest of the Dynasty Owner team. On Mondays, we've got Nate Christian, who's going to breaks down rookies in his prospect preview. On Wednesday, we've got Matt the Jerk, who is doing some deep dives into the different contracts for every team. He's taking one team every week and looking at it. And then on Thursday, for you established Dynasty owners who maybe didn't do so well last year and might be thinking about a rebuild, Jay Pounds is going to talk to you about what to do to rebuild your Dynasty Owner team. So thanks for watching. Thanks for reading. Thanks for following all of us and being a part of Dynasty Owner. Have a great day. Bye.